I'm Ruby Jones, and you're listening to 7am. When news broke this week of an alleged sexual assault involving the Sydney Swans AFL team in Melbourne, old fault lines in the way the sport handles accusations against its players reignited. Everything from the players involved to the language used by the club and the way the media reported the allegations came under the microscope. So, how much has changed when it comes to footy players doing the wrong thing? And what would a good response from the AFL look like? Today, journalist and author of Night Games, Krien, on what the response to the scandal says about footy culture and those who threaten to see it progress. It's Thursday, August 20. So, Anna, over a decade ago now, you wrote Night Games, which is all about gender and sex and power and the AFL. And in that book, there was one high-profile case in particular you were looking at and the fallout from it. But can you tell me a bit about what it was like reporting on the culture around footy and allegations of sexual assault when you were writing it, so in 2013?
Yeah, it was vastly different to today. I was just having a look back on some of the commentary around the particular case that I was reporting on, and there were former footballers, tweeting yet another alleged girl making alleged allegations after she awoke with an alleged hangover, and I take it as an alleged guilty conscience. And then there was girls, when will you learn? At 3 a.m. when you're blind and drunk and you decide to go home with a guy, it's not for a cup of Milo. So I think it was a fairly different beast. Even when I was writing the book in 2010, it had been determinedly or somewhat determinedly making overtures to change its culture. And I think in 2004, the then AFL CEO was Andrew Dimitri, and he was asking all women to come forward with any allegations. And I remember that prompted a lot of derision from the dyed-in-the-wool footy heads back then. There was John Elliott, who ran the Carlton Football Club for about 20 years, and he was absolutely dismissive of the AFL trying to change its tune, and said, we just paid the Sheilas off and they were happy just to get their hush money. So, I do think a lot has changed between then and now.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit more about that change, because this week news broke, obviously, about an alleged sexual assault involving the Swans. So what were your first thoughts on seeing that news break and then watching the kind of unfolding response?
My first response was actually quite personal. My son is a Swans supporter, and over the years, through watching him and his joy that he takes in watching the Swans as a little boy and growing up to be, a teenager, I've really participated and enjoyed it. So for me, when I heard it, I was like, no, please, no. I was, really disappointed. That seems to be the word that everyone's saying. But, I was deeply, deeply disappointed and sad when I heard the news.
And so when it comes to the way the institution of the AFL has responded, we had that statement from Andrew Dillon, the CEO, on Tuesday night. Tell me what you made of it.
So the AFL CEO, Andrew Dillon, in his statement, which obviously wasn't solely written by Andrew Dillon, it was obviously written by a lot of people, but, I was impressed by it. The line, sexual assault allegations are serious, regardless of who is involved, what time of year it is, or what they may mean for the season. I think that is just an absolute breath of fresh air in comparison to, the last 40-odd years. And this has been driven by women. And I think this is actually a moment of, disappointment and sadness. But there should also be some kind of warmth to this moment, I think. I think that we are seeing the impact of lots of advocacy work and lots of hard work being done on the ground.
And the response from the club itself, the Swans, I feel like we've seen a few different attempts over the last few days to address the issues, and the messaging has changed a bit. At first, we had CEO Matthew Pavlich. I mean, he was criticised for the way he talked about the players finding themselves in this situation on Monday.
We're still piecing together exactly what's transpired here and have our own set of internal inquiries ongoing. But safe to say that we're extremely shocked and disappointed that this has taken place and that the players have found themselves in this situation.
Then on Wednesday, there was this press conference. The club did acknowledge the women involved, but that was after they were prompted by journalists.
Matthew, you've offered apologies and your thoughts to everybody today, the players, the fans, the sponsors, the partners of the players. What about the women at the centre of this?
We have we're deeply concerned about their welfare and the well-being of those women. We offer as much support as we can. They're the ones who are impacted severely at the moment, and we are here to acknowledge those allegations and acknowledge.
Have you offered those apologies?
It's a police matter, so we're not going to interfere with that.
5 players have now been suspended for the rest of the season. Tell me what you have thought as you've watched the way the Swans have handled it.
Well, first of all, in the presser today, I actually disagree. The woman was acknowledged before the journalists prompted them. She was acknowledged among a list of others also acknowledged. So I actually think the club did acknowledge the woman. The earlier statement about the players finding themselves in a situation, that was a little bit off, a little bit reductive. I mean, they didn't just close their eyes and wake up and it was all a dream. We're dealing with adults here, and adults make decisions and adults have agency. The presser with the Swans CEO and chairman, the posture was not defensive. The posture was not antagonistic. It was not passive-aggressive. And it was not ever implying that the boys are good and the complainant is not. I trusted the remorse that these two men showed, and you felt that a lot of work had been diminished by the actions. But I also was impressed that they said they would continue to support the players. They weren't going to punish and banish. They were going to punish and support. And I think that's a crucial difference in how progress is made. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry. I feel like people want me to be more angry. And maybe I've just gotten a bit old, or maybe I just, sometimes I just feel like the media just really enjoys acting as if nothing has changed when I think quite a lot has changed.
I suppose, though, I mean, talking about the fate of the club and this particular footy season, and in the case of that press conference today about, corporate sponsors, I think for some people watching, it feels like that's coming at the expense of talking about the potential victims involved.
Yeah, but Ruby, you can't. You can't talk about the potential victims. I mean, you can't even really use the word victim. It's a complainant. It's an alleged incident. I mean, and there's something to be said about that. There's a sort of black box in the middle of this discussion in which we cannot talk about. There is absolutely no way, I think, anyone in any position of authority at the moment can talk to that incident without putting their foot in it. People say that Pavlich put his foot in it when he talked about finding themselves in the situation. I mean, it's far easier to put your foot in it when talking about a case that's still under investigation.
Still to come, the media's flawed response. Anna, can we talk a bit more about the media's role here? In the past, as you mentioned earlier, there was a lot of focus on the woman and her age and insinuations of complicity. What have you noticed change over the years?
Well, I think, again, there's been quite a different response. Again, when I was writing Night Games, there was definitely an element of many sports reporters feeling like they were in the team as opposed to reporting on the sport and reporting what needed to be reported. And there was a sense that journalists saw themselves more as fans and as mates of players rather than doing their job. And I don't think you see that so much anymore. I think you immediately have quite different questions being asked by reporters, a different approach of impact. But they, again, that's a bit different to, say, the footy commentators. I think a lot of footy commentators have immediately gone to talk about what this means for the game and for the season and so forth. But also to that end, that's been quite condemned, that footy commentators have talked about how disappointing this is for the rest of the team and the other players, that these 5 players have actually, ruined a season for their club and for their teammates. And I actually think there's something quite good happening here, in the sense that peer pressure is really important, and it's absolutely vital when it comes to the locker room and jock culture and what's okay and what's not okay. And this, again, signifies a huge shift. 10 years ago, this was totally fine. In fact, the worse you behaved, the more of a legend you were. Now it's actually been turned around saying you've let your teammates down. You've totally undone so much hard work, and you should be really, really, disappointed in yourself and grovelling to your teammates about how much you have screwed this up.
Sure, but when it comes to what we hear from some commentators, I mean, Sam Newman was on a podcast recently before this, and he was talking about a woman who was raped by Ralph Carr, who was an AFL player's agent, among other things. And he used the term buyer's remorse.
I'm just wondering what actual evidence they had. I'm not saying they didn't have any. I'm wondering what sort of evidence they had about him raping her, other than the fact she might have had buyer's remorse.
Sam,
So that particular view, I mean, it's still there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the shame that he still has microphones near him. I think everyone knows what Sam Newman is, and no one expects any more of him than what he currently gives and continues to give. But, he really is on the very front of the conveyor belt, leading out of the football world. He's not even yesterday's man. He's yesterday's man. He's only saying stuff to be relevant, because the reality is he's not relevant. I think he really is, the very last of a sort of crusty, dyed-in-the-wool style attitude that, it's footballers are entitled to behave in whatever way they want to behave. And I think you see generations that are currently in the league that really don't reflect that attitude at all.
And so you're making the case that we are in the middle of some sort of cultural change for the better at the moment.
It's much easier to be negative, isn't it? It's much easier to be down on the situation and to say that nothing's changed. But it doesn't. The fact that it has occurred means that the work is not over. It's an ongoing project. But I just am very concerned that the righteous outrage is diminishing such important and, valuable, constructive work that has been done by women within the AFL and the AFLW. We shouldn't be diminishing these huge leaps that have occurred over the past decade.
But is it the commentary that's diminishing that progress, or is it the actions of certain footy players?
I say both, actually. But I would also say, if you were to crunch the numbers, that these incidents are nowhere near what they were a decade ago, and and a decade before that, and a decade before that. I would say that, yes, absolutely, these 5 players have, maybe they've wound the clock back a little bit, or maybe it's just a reminder that people might have dropped the ball. Everyone's gotten a little bit too relaxed in the ongoing education that needs to occur. I remember with Night Games when it came out, I remember getting a very cold reception from, the AFL and dyed-in-the-wool footballers and football reporters, football lovers. But I also got a very cold reception from so-called feminists in universities. And I remember feeling a little bit, miffed, kind of, why am I being attacked by my so-called allies? And that part of it was because I was exploring the nuances and the difficulties of consent and the difficulties of interactions between young people, let alone when you throw power dynamics into the situation. But then I remember a football coach reaching out to me at a community club, and he said, I've got 50 copies of your book and I'm giving it to every single player in under 16s. And I remember thinking, that's where we need to be leveling our conversation. It just feels like we constantly turn this into a bit of a culture war when there are better ways to convey, consent, harm, all those kind of things. And we don't need to sort of, constantly be thumping the drum. I don't know. There's something to be said for seeing the progress as well as seeing the disappointment of the most recent events.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thanks, Ruby. Thanks for having me.
Also in the news, an appeal against the conviction of Erin Patterson for the murder of 3 family members fed a poisoned beef Wellington will enter its second day today. Yesterday, Patterson's lawyers argued her conviction be overturned on the grounds that some of the evidence should never have been admissible and that allowing jurors to stay in the same hotel as police and the prosecution was a catastrophic failure in the justice system. The prosecution is also appealing against her life sentence, arguing she should never be eligible for parole. And fire authorities in the Northern Territory, New South Wales and Queensland are sounding the alarm, warning of a risky fire season ahead. A warmer and drier spring outlook with above-average growth in vegetation is fuelling concern. People in bushfire zones are being urged to prepare early. I'm Ruby Jones. This is 7am. Thanks for listening.